What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the FF Ballbusters podcast. Thank you for joining us. My name is Eric. That's my co-host Will, and today we are getting into our final installment of our rankings and tiers for the 2024 NFL Draft class, ending it with the running backs. I think we picked running backs to end with on purpose. It's definitely a little bit of a muddier class, harder to decipher, harder to get through. We took our time with these rankings and still didn't really reach much of a consensus. So I think today's format is really just going to be bringing up these players' names, kind of discussing what their strengths and weaknesses are, and then either during or at the end, we can kind of include our individual rankings list, and you guys can decide how you feel about them at that point. But yeah, that's what we're doing today. And before we get into that, Will, do you have anything to say to the people?
Absolutely. You guys have been doing a great job showing support, doing all that great YouTube stuff, and I just want to make sure we keep that up. So if you're watching this video and you're a first-time viewer, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That way you know when we drop all of our latest videos. And let us know down in the comments below because, again, like Eric said, this is a muddier class. And the comment section has been a bit of a resource for us. You guys have been really good at evals and just giving us some different perspectives. So keep that up in the comment section down below. And yeah, we can go ahead and get into this one.
Absolutely. So do you want to kind of talk about just like how we feel about this running back class as a whole? Because the public perception right now is definitely down. People are hating on this running back class, and I think for some good reasons. But what are your thoughts in general here?
So I think that, people are labeling this as a weaker class, and I don't necessarily disagree with that sentiment. Like you said, I don't think there really is a guy this year that's like the top guy like there was in years prior with Bijan, Saquon, stuff like that. But I do feel like there is a lot of value to still be found in this class, especially based upon landing spots. And in today's NFL, where a lot of teams are moving towards committee approaches, there are still a lot of good values that could be found out of these guys just based on the skill sets that they have. So, like I said, not really a great guy in this class, but still a lot of good guys with a lot of good potential.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And yeah, like you mentioned, it's tough to find one guy that really stands out above the rest. So starting this video off might be a little bit difficult, but who would you like to start with and the first player to bring up?
So we can start with one of the guys, like you would have mentioned before we started recording. It was a guy I brought up pretty early. I had him pretty high in my rankings early on. And, the stock has really gone up a lot lately for him as well. It's Jonathon Brooks out of Texas. Obviously, he spent a couple years behind a lot of great running backs, and I feel like Texas has been pumping out some pretty good running backs as of late. And, Jonathon Brooks is no exception. Of course, he suffered an ACL tear late in the season. People weren't really sure if he was going to declare, but he did end up going for it. But, just in the time he did have on the field was amazing, honestly, in my opinion. With 212 touches, 1,425 total yards, and 11 total touchdowns. It's 6 feet, 207, and 20 years old. He's just an explosive guy who's good at creating for himself in, those tight areas of the field and great in open space as a receiver as well. So it's like I said, he's not like a world breaker like Bijan was, but still an extremely solid running back that I feel like should be ranked this high. But what do you feel about Jonathon Brooks?
I couldn't agree more. He's also my number one ranked running back in the class. Obviously, the injury, does provide a little bit of concern, especially with where his recovery timetable is going to line up. But just looking at the tape and the stats, I couldn't be more impressed with Jonathon Brooks. He was incredibly smooth. I love the footwork, the short area change of direction. He's maybe the best in the class at like consistently making second level defenders miss as he passes through the line of scrimmage. So he turns, what a lot of running backs would make 5-yard gains into 10 and 15-yard gains, which is going to be money at the next level. Patient, powerful, decisive. The only real knock that I could find against him is that he's not like an elite athlete. He doesn't have the best speed or quickness necessarily. He does get caught from behind occasionally on big runs, but he's just really, really consistent at churning out chunk gains. And so, yeah, he's definitely my favorite of the class. He's also really young, which I think you mentioned at 20 years old. He's a redshirt sophomore. And even in limited opportunity in his first 2 years behind Bijan and Roschon, although, it's not anything world breaking, he was really efficient when given the opportunity. So he's always been good at any time he's touched the field. He's got projected 3rd round draft capital in terms of where he's going to go in the NFL draft. And so if he gets that, especially if it's like, early third round, I think that really justifies and solidifies his spot here.
I absolutely agree. Who do you have next on the list you want to bring up?
I'd be down to talk about Trey Benson out of Florida State. Um, Definitely an interesting tape watch because, like the strengths are really strong, and I think some of the weaknesses are also pretty weak. But I think in tandem, it comes together to be a pretty good package. At his size, which is really impressive, 6'1", 223 pounds, I think he actually has really surprising stop-start ability and good acceleration for a guy that big. Really good straight line speed as well. Like, he has plenty of home run plays on his tape where he can go the distance. He's not going to get caught from behind very often. Obviously, at that size, he's very physical, fights through contact, powerful, always keeps the legs churning. But in terms of weaknesses, I feel like his vision is a little bit inconsistent. His decision making at the line of scrimmage isn't always the best. He can kind of be hesitant and dance a little bit in the backfield, which you don't love to see. And then again, at his size, he lacks high speed change of direction ability, so he's not like super creative in the open field, and he gets squared up by defenders a lot, so he takes kind of big hits. But outside of that, I really liked what I saw from him. He's fairly young at 21 years old and put up pretty good production. He never got over 1,000 yards, but also he wasn't asked to tote the rock all that much at FSU.
Nah, I completely mirror a lot of those sentiments. I think he's kind of an upright runner from time to time too, and that can also, lead to him getting punished a little bit on the field as well. But like you said, his ability to kind of generate those kind of big plays is very valuable in both the receiving and in the rushing game. Like you said, it was kind of a limited sample because he wasn't asked to do a lot, but when he was on the field to do a lot, or when he was on the field, he did make the most out of it. I guess the best way to put that. A lot of people have him also as like their RB1. I know we've seen that in the comments as well throughout the season. And I don't think that's necessarily a wrong take. I think, like we said, he deserves to be up in that mix, up in that top tier of at least these guys in this draft. So I do I'd like Trey Benson in this class. I have him pretty high ranked in this one too.
Yeah. But definitely interesting to see that he was as low volume as he was, considering he has that workhorse size. But another thing in his favor is the projected draft capital being like that late second round. Really, there's nobody going higher than that currently projected. With what we talked about with the running back class, that's basically the ceiling in terms of draft capital for these guys. So that would be very good for him to get. Who do you want to bring up next?
Let's go over to Oregon. Let's talk about Bucky Irving. He's actually, in my opinion, one of the more exciting runners out of this group as well, just in terms of all-around just talent. Obviously, he got two back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, so he's shown some consistency there. He also caught 56 passes this past year for 413 yards and 2 touchdowns, so it's just kind of like he's out there playing at a different speed than everybody else. Like, he really is playing at just a different gear. He's one of the smaller guys at 5'10", 194, but as we've seen, especially this season, size isn't the biggest thing anymore when it comes to the running back position, especially when teams can get creative with using these smaller guys, and Bucky Irving is one of those guys where you could put him just about anywhere on the field and he can make something happen with it. In short area, his burst is amazing, and he's really elusive out in space, so he's just really hard to bring down. And also for just the size he is, he does play a lot bigger than his size. He's a very physical runner as well to go along with that. So he's definitely going to shrug off some tackles, bounce off some tackles as well, just be hard to bring down. So Bucky Irving, I feel like, where exactly is his draft capital so far in this class?
Or at least projected. Projected to be a third-round pick right now.
Okay, which is similar to like guys like we've seen with Devon Achane, where he was a third-round pick and was highly utilized in his offense and, able to be creative with that. So I think that Bucky Irving is one of those high-ceiling guys. If he can land in the right spot, he can really just take off, hit the ground running. Pardon the pun.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I agree with everything you had to say about Bucky. I don't have too much to add. You mentioned the 56 receptions. That was a positional lead in college football. He had the most receptions of any running back last year, so that's really impressive to see. Over 1,300 scrimmage yards at 6 yards per carry for back-to-back seasons. Incredibly productive and impressive in that regard as well. Really, the only concerns are size-related. He does get stonewalled by defensive linemen and linebackers Obviously, when you're 195, that's going to happen. I don't think he's afraid to run inside, but he's definitely less effective in between the tackles than he is like off tackle and outside zone and stuff like that. And not very strong in pass protection. But yeah, I mean, the pros outweigh those by a lot. I think he's an incredibly natural pass catcher, and that's probably going to be his biggest strength when he gets to the NFL level. I could see him being a real threat in the receiving game. And just in terms of like body and build comps, like James Cook isn't too far off from like his body type. And we've seen James Cook have plenty of success. I think Bucky Irving is even more twitchy and athletic than James Cook, and they're both, very good in the receiving game. So I think that is the potential kind of mold that he could fit into when he gets to the next level.
I like that comp. I like that comp a lot. Who do you have next on the list you want to talk about?
Let's see here. So we had a little bit of a discussion about him before we came on air here. I do want to bring up Blake Corum. I have him a little bit higher in my personal rankings than I think he ended up falling in yours, but I actually like your reasoning for where you have him. Mine definitely took into consideration public opinion, projected draft capital, because he's currently slated to be a late second round pick. And just like the evals that I've heard from the scouting community have been glowing about him. When I watched the tape, I wasn't quite as impressed, or at least like not to the level that I feel like the hype that he's gotten would, what I expected to see isn't what I saw, is basically what I'm trying to get at. But I did think he had really quick feet, really good lateral agility. I think he's a smart runner. I think he hits the right holes when he's supposed to. He's got good burst through those holes. Another guy that consistently makes those second level defenders miss in the gap. But he's not a special athlete. I don't think he has home run speed. At his size, I think he lacks some power. And he doesn't have a lot of open field creativity in terms of making guys miss at the third level. So he's a good running back, but I wasn't overly excited about his tape.
Yeah, Blake Corum he was interesting for me because, like you said, he's good. You know what I mean? I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say that he's bad. I'm just unclear about who he is really as a player. Like you said, he's pretty dense. He's 5'8", but he's 210. So it's like he's a big guy, but he doesn't really run like he's a big guy. But at the same time, he's explosive, but he's not that fast. But, he can catch passes, but like how well can he catch passes? Can he really be a third down back? And also at the same time as all of this, he's 23. He's going to be 23 years old by the time the season starts. So I'm not saying that he's, old. Well, he is old for a prospect, especially compared to a lot of these other guys. We're talking 20-year-olds versus a 23-year-old. But at the same time, I feel like he's a player that NFL teams will value. I'm sure he's a guy who can make it work at the next level. I want him to have a good career. I think he will have a good career. It's just what kind of capital is somebody like that going to really get at the end of the day? Because right now, you were telling me that he's projected as like a late second round pick. And me personally, I think he'd be lucky to be a day 2 guy. So I don't know exactly where the chips are going to fall. And obviously there's time for these things to get moved around. So don't kill me in the comments section. This is just my early looks at him. But I don't know, to be honest.
This is definitely going to be one of our more controversial opinions. Yeah. Because people love Blake Corum. And we're not totally shitting on him. We're not saying he's bad. I think we've made that clear. We do like Blake Corum. Tape evaluation, though, I don't think tape evaluation and also like athletic traits, he doesn't really stack up that well against some of the other guys in this class. Probably worth noting, and something that might be in his favor, is that he did tear his ACL in late November of last year. Still came back, played every game this season as the workhorse, 250 carries and over 1,200 yards in back-to-back seasons, even with that ACL tear. So that was impressive to see, and probably, limited his explosiveness, at least early on in the season this year, and maybe we'll see that kind of rebound. I did go back and I watched a little bit of his 2022 tape, and I think you could see a little bit of a difference. He was a little bit more explosive, but still fairly similar kind of description for him, even in 2022. But yeah, that probably rounds out the Blake Corum discussion. Who would your next player be?
Let's talk Will Shipley. Will Shipley is an interesting player for me. I feel like, Obviously, real lunch pail guy. I'm joking. I'm not going to do all that. I think that Will Shipley as a running back, he's probably one of the more crafty running backs. I feel like people don't give him a whole lot of credit, obviously, for his athleticism, but I do think he is one of the more athletic and one of the quickest running backs in this class, to be honest. And he's just a very fluid runner as well. And he's also just really good in the receiving game, able to make it happen over there. I feel like he's one of those guys that if at the NFL level he gets paired up with the right guy, he could end up being just a really good part of a 1-2 punch for any offense in the NFL. Obviously, injuries kind of plagued his season this year, so we didn't really get to see a ton out of Will Shipley this year that we would have liked to see. But obviously, in years past, we've seen the versatility, we've seen the talent, we've seen his, ability to just have great instincts in the short field, his ability to just dart back and forth, cut back from lane to lane when he does need to. And his hip flexibility is amazing in terms of him being able to turn and make those cuts. Like I said, he's just a very fluid player. And he's a great athlete, all things considered. But what do you think about Will Shipley?
I'm in full agreement. I was really impressed by his tape. The biggest thing to me was that he's such a natural receiver, in terms of not just his hands, but also the diversity of routes that he's able to run in comparison to the rest of the guys in this class.
Mm-hmm.
Like him and Bucky Irving are definitely in a class of their own when it comes to receiving ability.
Absolutely.
In this running back class. So those guys are definitely, guys you should be targeting. Receiving ability is going to be huge, or obviously is huge when it comes to NFL production and fantasy production. I agree with you in terms of his quickness. The burst that he has out of cuts is really impressive. His lateral agility and footwork were things that I thought stood out to me on tape. Decent power for his size as well at 5'11", 210. I think he's pretty smart in terms of his ability to set up blockers, and like he understands defensive leverage, and so he can use especially open field blockers to his advantage and gain more yards than I think a lot of other guys do in this class. The only knock that I had against him is just the lack of top end speed to finish big plays, but that's been the case with, a few of these other running backs as well. In terms of analytical profile, also really impressive that he broke out as a true freshman at Clemson, being named the starting running back immediately out of the gate, and improved upon that season in his sophomore year, going for almost 1,200 yards and 15 touchdowns and catching 38 passes. Unfortunately, this junior year, he did regress a little bit statistically, but this was probably the worst Clemson team that he's been a part of in his career. But still managed to do well in the receiving game. And it wasn't that he was super inefficient. It was just the overall counting stats went down a little bit. He's sitting currently with a projected draft capital of the 4th round, which in this class isn't so bad, especially if it's like early day 3. That's definitely not the worst thing. And he could definitely be a contributor at the next level.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. All right, so who you got next on the list you want to bring up here?
So this one might be an interesting one. Again, we did talk about these lists beforehand, and I know this isn't a guy that you would really looked into. So I'll do most of the heavy lifting here. It's going to be Raymond Davis out of Kentucky. Like, if we're talking about most surprising, most like pleasantly surprising eval of the entire group, Ray Davis was easily that for me. I didn't have a single negative thing to say about him in terms of tape evaluation. His contact balance was fantastic. I think he showed great strength and tackle breaking ability versus all levels, defensive linemen, linebackers, DBs. His open field playmaking ability was pretty incredible, super shifty, but also decisive. He didn't waste time or waste steps in the open field and was able to gain the requisite yards. Really good acceleration and home run speed. Low pad level and power. I think he was smart and patient behind the line of scrimmage. He's just electric. He's a big play waiting to happen, and plenty of those big plays showed up, especially in the Florida tape. If you go back and watch that, he had like 280 yards and 4 touchdowns. He was destroying SEC competition. I could go on. There's so many positives I had in terms of his tape evaluation, but really, really impressive. The red flags come when you look at his age and analytical profile. He's going to be 24 years old as a 5th-year senior heading into the NFL. So, yeah, 24, ripe old age, definitely for these prospects. He's got a complicated story, which I won't go all the way into, but he entered college a year older than most. and then kind of bounced around in terms of transfers from where he was going to college, which led to an extra year of eligibility. And so he used all 5 years that he could get, plus the added year, prior to college, which is why he's a little bit of an older prospect. But even in his earlier college career, when he went to Temple, I think he was productive there. And then obviously had a really productive season here at Kentucky. He's got a projected draft capital in the 4th round, and he's got good size at 5'10", 216. So I've heard people talk about him as like an under-the-radar guy. I'm incredibly impressed, and obviously have him a lot higher than I think most will.
Yeah, like Eric said, our conversation about him was my first time hearing about him, but just off of what you've told us here, he is somebody I'm pretty excited about. I need to look into him a little bit more because I think he could be one of those underrated like gems. Like you said, the age, I brought it up with Blake Corum as well. It's a concern, but it's not really a concern. Like, you know what I mean? At the end of the day, talent is talent, and talent's going to win out. And if he's as good as you're saying he is, talent should win out in that situation. So I'm liking him there too.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, like, if you get a guy that comes in at 20 years old, obviously that's a benefit.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times with these running backs, you're really just worried about if they can get through their first contract. And he can get through his first contract.
Yeah.
So, the longevity might not be there, but you're worried about production early and often. And I think you can get that out of a guy like Ray Davis.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so with that, who would you like to bring up as your next player on the list?
Well, while we're on the topic of Davises, I'm going to stay with another Davis. His name is Isaiah Davis out of South Dakota State. He's just one of those guys I feel like is also going to fly a little bit under the radar as well. Over the last 2 seasons, he had over 3,000 yards and 33 touchdowns while averaging 6 yards per carry. And he's really just kind of built like your prototypical running back that you would like. He's 6'1", 220. He's a great forward runner. He's got really good finishing ability, as you can see by the 33 touchdowns he had. And I feel like that's going to be something that wins over a lot of NFL scouts. But it's just, I feel like he's creative. He's got great feet. He's very adaptable. He's got good vision. I don't have too much to say about Isaiah Davis because he's someone I really do need to take a deep dive into as well. But just the things that I have seen from him, I was very impressed. And he's one of the top overall, FCS prospects in this class as well. So able to make something happen out of there. But I feel like he's one of those guys that as time is going to go along and also as we get into the combine process, his stock could end up rising quite a bit. So I think he is someone to have on your radar. I think both Davises here are great people to have on your radar.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought him up here because this is kind of the flip-flop where you didn't watch much of Ray Davis. I didn't really watch any of Isaiah Davis, but looking at his stats right now, incredibly impressive. You brought up the yardage and the touchdowns. His efficiency was also really, really good. Just listing it by year in terms of yards per carry, 8.5 as freshman, 7.4, 5.8, 6.7, and obviously it's expected that as volume increases, your efficiency is going to go down. But still, 6.7 last year, that's great. And early production in 2020 as a freshman, like over 800 yards, like I said, 8.5 yards per carry, 10 touchdowns. That is absolutely nothing to shake a stick at coming straight out of high school. So you love to see that, and definitely somebody that I'm going to have to take a closer look at.
Hell yeah. But who do you have next on this list you'd like to talk about?
Let's go to Audric Estime out of Notre Dame. One of the bigger backs in the class at 5'11", 227. Really young, 20 years old, true junior. He was efficient every year of his career, with his best season being this past year with 210 carries, 1,341 yards, and 18 touchdowns. He's got a projected draft capital of the 3rd round. And in terms of like the traits that I saw on tape, obviously the power was there. He's not going to get brought down by arm tackles, and he's always falling forward. I think his contact balance was good. Surprisingly fast for a guy that big. He can motor, and he can run by some DBs even. I don't know that that's going to be a consistent theme when he gets to the NFL level, but he was able to do it at Notre Dame. Decent hands in the receiving game as well. Not that he was like utilized heavily in that regard, but I think he can do it if given the opportunity. And a really good pass protector as well. The only cons that I saw were he's a slow accelerator. Big dudes typically are. Short area change of direction and lateral agility aren't his strengths either, but all around really solid and like I said, really efficient in terms of his production year to year.
No, I absolutely agree. I think at his size, he's tough to bring down. He's like a bowling ball out there once he really does get going. And like you said, he's 17 catches for 142 yards. It's not something that shows you that he's a great pass catcher, but it does have that receiving upside. Like, it's something he can do. He's not a complete zero at it. So that is awesome to see. And like you said, I feel like he's got good vision, patience, all that. So I do like Audric Estime, especially as a bigger prospect. And 18 touchdowns is also just crazy for a season as well. So that's just great finishing ability there too. So I do like Audric Estime.
All right, yeah, I like what you had to say there with Estime. But who do you want to bring up next?
So next, let's have a little discussion because this is a guy who's been around for a while. He's still very young, and it's just going to be an interesting conversation. We got Braelon Allen, someone who had a breakout age of 17, which is the youngest for everybody in this class. He's been at Wisconsin for 3 years, got almost 3,500 yards in those 3 years, 35 touchdowns, and he's just about to turn 20, I believe. He's still 19 as of right now, I believe, isn't he? Or did he just turn 20?
I think he is. I don't remember what his actual birth date is. Let me look it up while you talk about him.
Okay, but Braelon Allen is a guy who has been one of the premier guys in this class for a while, up until this year. He was someone that people were touting as like possibly top 2, top 3, just about as long as he's been in college. Obviously because of that early breakout age, and also he's built like a tank. He's 6'2", I think 238 to 245 is the ranges I've seen his weight listed at, which is insane. Yeah. And as one of just a pure runner for this class, he's up there with the best of them. He doesn't really show a ton of talent as a receiver, which is something that's kind of limiting, our viewpoint of him, especially in today's NFL. But just in terms of just lateral creativity and not lateral creativity, that's something he needs to work on as well. Just in terms of size, athleticism, and just physicality, he's already ready at the NFL level, I feel like. But this year, he definitely took a step back in terms of production, in terms of just overall impressiveness, honestly. He just wasn't the prospect that we thought he was the prior 2 years. So he's tough to eval. I feel like he kind of fell a little bit low in a lot of our rankings as well. I think he's slowly been sliding as time's been going along. But what do you feel about Braelon Allen?
I'm in agreement for the most part. And just to confirm in terms of age, he just had his birthday, January 20th, 2004, which is crazy to say. But yeah, just turned 20 years old. So he will be 20 for the entirety of his rookie year. Yeah, I talked about Ray Davis as the most pleasant surprise, the most exciting watch. This was like the most disappointing surprise to me in terms of tape eval. Analytically, fantastic, especially like you said with that 17-year-old breakout. Like literally it doesn't get earlier than that. He I think took like summer classes and stuff to finish high school early, to get to college a year early so that he could be a 17-year-old freshman, and had his best season of his entire college career that freshman year, bursting onto the scene in the Big Ten. He ran for 1,268 yards, 12 touchdowns on 6.8 yards per carry. He was a big play machine, had the speed, but it was also the impressive tackle breaker that we talked about at his size. But then the last 2 years, the production and efficiency have both gone down in consecutive years. He failed to eclipse 1,000 yards this year and had his lowest number of carries for his career, which is even crazier because he also posted his least efficient year of his career on the lowest volume. So definitely concerning. I do think that athletically, for a guy his size, he is really impressive. Good acceleration and speed. I think he's really good in pass protection. And, even though the strength of his game isn't pass catching, I do think he has like comfortable pass catching ability. He's not going to be a liability in that regard. But yeah, laterally, not very impressive, not creative or elusive in the open field. And honestly, for a guy as big as he is, I didn't think he had the greatest contact balance or play strength.
Yeah.
I think he would actually benefit from dropping some weight, going back down into that 230 range instead of being up at 245. I think it's kind of holding him back a little bit. But I mean, who am I to tell this guy what to do? It's currently projected to get third-round draft capital, which is going to be quite nice for anybody in this class. So another guy that I think will probably be a controversial take on our list, but yeah, just wasn't that impressed.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I don't know. There's still a lot of room for Braelon Allen to rise through ranks, stuff like that. And honestly, if he lands with the right team, he could just hit the ground, and just keep going. He might get back to that form, but it's like you said, when his first year is his best year and he's slowly declined since, it's tough to be super optimistic going forward. It's tough.
Yeah.
But who else would you like to talk about on this list? Now we're starting to whittle it down a little bit.
Yeah, we're close to the end here. I have two guys left to talk about. Are you in the same boat? Do we both have two left here?
Yep.
Okay. The next guy that I'd like to bring up is going to be MarShawn Lloyd out of USC. A little bit of an interesting tape eval for a lot of the same reasons that Caleb Williams has been having some detractors. That offensive line is just atrocious. Like, it's so bad, and the offensive scheme isn't really built for running back success. He's only ever running out of the shotgun, and it's like kind of gimmicky run schemes. So it's really hard to get a good eval in terms of like how he is as an in between the tackles runner, because the line was constantly falling apart and collapsing in his face, and I just don't think he was given a good opportunity to really read holes and given time. But in terms of what he can do as a playmaker and in space, he's incredibly elusive, very dangerous on swing passes and screens, as you can see by his ridiculous efficiency in the passing game. I think he had 2 seasons of like over 12 yards per reception, which is wild for the running back position. Really impressive speed and acceleration, good burst through holes, utilizes a really good stiff arm consistently throughout his tape. The only things that I had knocks on him were kind of his situation, but also that he doesn't consistently take contact well. I think he has kind of inconsistent pad height, and so that can kind of rear its ugly head occasionally. But other than that, I was really impressed with what I saw from him. 5'9", 210 in terms of weight. He is 23 years old. He was a redshirt junior that got redshirted due to a torn ACL in his freshman year. So a little bit on the older side, but I'm rambling now. He's really impressive to me. Did you get a chance to look at his tape?
I actually did, and I thought that, he was kind of impressive, especially laterally, able to get around the line pretty well. Change of direction was pretty good, and like I said, like you said, contact balance wasn't amazing, but I feel like it was good for what he needs to do. You know what I mean? I feel like he's good at staying on his feet, and he's pretty spry. He's a competent receiver. You kind of alluded to that as well. And I just do think it was impressive that even with that really bad offensive line that they had, he was still able to average over 7 yards per carry. So he was still able to find a lot of efficiency back there, even in a bad situation. So I think, like you said, I think he's a competent back, and I think that, his talents will suit some NFL team at the next level. It's just a matter of where it is he ends up falling at, and it's going to be the same for a lot of these guys. And he's going to be in the Senior Bowl, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll get to see a little bit more of MarShawn Lloyd as well, so that'll be cool as well, just to get a little bit more of an eval.
Yeah, and that's a good point you bring up. It really, common theme, but it's really going to depend where he ends up. He's currently projected to have 6th-round draft capital. I think there's some concerns around his durability, which is probably what's pushing him down. Yeah, and also I did undersell it. I have the stats in front of me now. He averaged a yards per reception of 13.3 over his 3-year career. So in totality, like, he was just killing it out of the backfield as a receiver. But yeah, so that's all I got for MarShawn Lloyd. Who do you want to bring up next?
And we're getting down to what I believe is the last guy on the list. I think we both have him as the last guy on our list. It's Jaylen Wright out of Tennessee. And honestly, this is the guy that if you like a fast running back, he's your guy. Like, he is that change of pace back for this group of guys. His vertical speed is just incredible, to be honest with you. Out of these guys, he's probably going to test as one of the fastest in the class, if not the fastest. And at 5'11", 210, that's kind of what you'd like to see that. Now, I think that even though he is 5'11", 210, I think he does get knocked over quite a bit. I don't think he's great at staying upright. I don't think he has great contact balance. But when he is out in the open field, I don't have too many people catching him. Like, his long speed is elite, and I feel like that's just one of the things he has over every single one of these guys. He's got really quick feet as well. You would hope he could stay on his feet a little bit more, be a little bit better in between the tackles. But at the same time, if he does get in that space and the team is able to be creative with him, the sky's kind of the limit for this guy because nobody's really going to catch him. But what do you think about Jaylen Wright?
I think you brought up. I think your outline of him as a prospect was really good. I didn't have much to add, but yeah, game-breaking speed, like legitimate home run threat on every single play. Probably low 4.3 guy, I would guess. Great acceleration too. The lateral agility was impressive. I think you made a really good point. Even like visually, just looking at him, He doesn't have a very big like lower half. I feel like he's kind of top heavy, which might contribute to some of that contact balance issues and him getting knocked around a little bit. So hopefully he can kind of balance that out and give him a more complete kind of prospect profile there. But yeah, he's definitely a big play waiting to happen. He's 20 years old, so really young.
Yeah.
And I think he showed drastic improvement year over year production wise in terms of his rushing totals and his efficiency every year of his career at Tennessee. And even on limited volume, because he's not like a workhorse type back. He only ran the ball 137 times last year, but at 7.4 yards per carry, he was able to eclipse that 1,000-yard mark. Again, when we get into these later guys, the question is going to be draft capital and landing spot. He's currently projected as a 7th-round pick, so we're teetering on the edge of like UDFA territory, which is kind of a dice roll. But strictly in terms of tape eval, I think I would have had him higher if I didn't know that he was probably going to go this late in the draft.
No, I 100% agree. I 100% agree. Are there any guys that you wanted to just throw their names out just so people could have them on the radar? Any honorable mentions?
There's a couple. Yeah, we don't have to go in depth or anything, but Rasheen Ali out of Marshall. I think he's like an athletic freak that's probably a little bit raw in terms of his like actual in between the tackles running and vision. But he's somebody that I think will get drafted and deserves to be talked about. And then lastly, Cody Schrader out of Missouri. Well-rounded, really well-rounded, decent pass catcher. I think he was a smart runner, good at setting up his blocks and stuff like that. Just not like an athletic freak or anything.
I agree with both of those. And one more guy I wanted to mention, just because I feel like it'd be a miss, Dylan Johnson out of Washington. He's more interesting as a prospect, but he was very effective for his team. Obviously, going down the stretch, he was really good in the playoffs as well. So I'm sure a lot of people remember that too. So I just feel like it'd be a miss not to bring him up at least, Dylan Johnson. But before we get out of here, we can go ahead and give the people what our rankings are of these running backs, just so they can see how different we kind of ended up falling with them. I can go ahead and go first. Just list them out in order from top to bottom. 1, I've got Jonathon Brooks. 2, Trey Benson. 3, Bucky Irving. 4, Will Shipley. 5, Braelon Allen fell around here for me. I'm still a little bit hopeful. I'm hoping that things can turn around for him, but we'll see as time goes along. 6, I've got Audric Estime. Blake Corum fell at 7 for me. You guys are going to, you might kill me in the comments for it, but that's where he fell for me, so I'll be ready for it. Jaylen Wright at 8 for me, and then Isaiah Davis and MarShawn Lloyd rounding it out.
I like it. And we'll have these up on the screen. For me, I also had Jonathon Brooks at the top. Trey Benson sitting there at number 2. I have Blake Corum at 3, although we talked about it. I think we probably are closer to agreeing in terms of the tape eval. It's just more so the peripheral things that made him up in this top tier for me. I have Ray Davis all the way up at 4. Absolutely loved his tape. Bucky Irving at 5. Audric Estime at 6. Will Shipley at 7. Braelon Allen all the way down at 8. We'll see what kind of the public opinion, the scouting community opinion is, and how he performs at the combine. That could definitely affect things. And then MarShawn Lloyd and Jaylen Wright down there at 9 and 10. But yeah, that'll do it. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned something. If you have any questions about any of these prospects in particular, feel free to let us know down in the comments. If you have anything to add to the conversation, any prospects that we missed, or you agree, disagree with any of our takes here, definitely let us know. We'd be happy to have a conversation with you. And all that good YouTube stuff that we talked about at the top. If you're new to the channel and you enjoyed, please do leave a like on the video, and also hit that sub button and the notification bell so that you're up to date with all of our latest videos. But I think that's all I got. Will, you got anything to say to the people before we head out?
Yes. Also, make sure you check out those links down in the description below to our Discord. Join the community. We talk fantasy football literally every single day in there. So if you want to join a great group of guys, join up with that. There's also people having like teams and leagues with orphan squads. So if you're looking for, a league to play in, anything like that, join the Discord and get in touch with some of those guys because they may have some opportunities for you. And also check out the link to our sponsors over at Choice Music Group. As you can see, wearing some of the merch now as time goes. Check it out. There's some great stuff over there. And with that being said, if you guys made it this far into the video, as always, we love you. And we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
Peace.